Welcome back to another episode of Byline with Ben Dennis, going beyond the headlines as we do. It's ingrained in the format of this show, making sense of them without spin. No filler, no fluff, asking the questions that you want to get answered and making sure that officials are held to account here. We elected them. They got a job to do, and there's a lot to be answered and accounted for. So with that, today I am speaking with Asher Moss. He is the executive director of the Alliance for American Leadership. This is a brand new organization that is working to advance America's interests globally, given the large cuts to USAID. USAID and their many staffers had for years worked on humanitarian efforts across the globe, had facilitated programming and funding that the federal government had allotted for in order to advance America's interests, but also save people's lives. That agency was gutted. It was cut earlier this year during the large DOGE cuts that Elon Musk had spearheaded. So we're going to dive into how he is trying to fill the gap, if you will. And he has an interesting take on my question, whether other countries can trust the United States right now to fulfill their promises that they have previously made with humanitarian aid or international diplomacy as well. And if they can just largely trust America to follow through, given that presidents change, leadership changes, international diplomacy changes, the State Department changes, and why right now Americans should be concerned about the United States government allocating taxpayer money to efforts that are not spent here. He has an interesting take on that. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Asher. And then after that, we dive into the headlines that I think still have big unanswered questions lately of how they impact your daily life. So with that, let's dive right in with my interview with Asher. Joining me now is Asher Moss. He is the executive director of the Alliance for American Leadership. They are a group that works to advance the United States' role on a world stage. They say they support bipartisan candidates all across the table and all across the country. Asher, I appreciate you joining Byline. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
So,
excited to be here.
Of course, as I understand it, your organization was largely born out of the essential gutting of USAID earlier this year when we saw the wave of cuts to DOGE from Elon Musk and his staff, essentially dismantling an agency that had for years and years been promoting America's interests, either diplomatically or facilitating programs that provided humanitarian aid. So just set the scene for our listeners and viewers here, the top goals of the Alliance for American Leadership and what you're really hoping to achieve right now in this moment.
Sure. So we are hoping to restore our international assistance programs and make sure they are as effective as they can be. International assistance or foreign aid, what that really covers is, a whole swath of programs, including famine relief, medicine, especially HIV/AIDS relief, programs to help with democracy and governance, and other programs that the United States participates in across the world. But the really key thing to remember here about all of this is that it all covers less than 0.3% of the federal budget. So at the end of the day, we're doing a lot, and it's a lot of really interesting, cool stuff that is both the United States at its finest and doing so much for our national security, but it's also just really tiny. And so it's something that I think we definitely can make some political progress on and try to protect.
You talk about America's expenditures here, dollars and cents, how much money the United States spends on international diplomacy. Right now, there's some recent polling, at least in the election in Virginia, as we record in Washington, D.C. here, that had signaled that international interests diplomacy was not necessarily at the top of voters' minds as they had gone to the ballot box. So if someone comes up to you on the street, they may want to know more about your group from this interview. Sell it, if you will, of why it's important right now in this moment to still keep diplomacy, humanitarian aid in mind.
Yeah, well, one, it's just the right thing to do, and it shows America at its best. I mean, over the past 20 years, USAID saved 90 million lives. There is no federal agency besides USAID who can claim to have done that. I mean, that is truly incredible work. It is providing food and medicine and other life-saving care to people who really do need it. But number two, it is very much in U.S. interests. I mean, the reality is that if we want good trade deals that benefit American businesses, American consumers, then we need to have good relationships with other countries. If we want to have a military presence abroad and we want to make sure that we're countering our adversaries, we need to make sure that countries want to work with us. And providing this sort of life saving care is kind of the carrot that leads to all of those things.
The big question is how? What struggles have you been facing lately with USAID essentially been obliterated earlier this year? How are you filling that void right now? What projects have you been working on lately?
So lately, we've been very focused on PEPFAR, which is an HIV/AIDS program that President Bush started. We were able to pretty much protect PEPFAR from some of the cuts the administration was proposing. There was a slowdown in funding for PEPFAR, and some of that money has not gone through. But at the very least, Congress opposed some of the most drastic cuts the administration had proposed for PEPFAR, and that was one of our key points of advocacy. Going forward, we're in a very difficult political climate for foreign aid. So I think it really is about figuring out, which specific programs have support in Congress and across the country. PEPFAR, for instance, was very strongly supported by Susan Collins, so it was something we could push on. What are the other programs like that? How can we protect funding? How can we make sure that, we see as few lives as possible being lost over the next couple years due to shutting down these programs?
You talked about Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine. What other congressional leaders, House, Senate, maybe even state legislatures too, governors, stand out to you right now, Republicans and Democrats, that are still really hitting the drum hard to try and make sure that the work that USAID had been doing continues right now?
And so, for instance, Mike Turner and Brian Fitzpatrick voted against the rescissions package in the House. Those two representatives, this was a bill to kind of formalize the cuts to USAID, and they were the two Republican representatives who voted against it. So there are a few, and then there's a bunch others who have historically been very supportive of foreign aid and maybe haven't been as vocal lately. And so we go into their offices and, we can have a good meeting with them and we're very much on the same page, but then maybe they're not out publicly where they need to be. I'll give a great example of that. Bill Cassidy, his staffer in the Senate is actually a former employee at USAID and covers all foreign affairs issues for Bill Cassidy. And so, that is an office that is very much on board with foreign aid, but hasn't voted like that lately. And so that's the key disconnect we're seeing. These offices, policy-wise, have supported these programs for decades, and that's the kind of support we're trying to build upon. Then they're pretty scared to go out against the president on any of these things right now.
Listen, I see where you're going there. No matter who is in the White House, Republicans or Democrats, they walk a tightrope when it comes to messaging. They don't want to buck the leader of the party. But your point right there, I understand that Republicans may not be as vocal right now on specific issues if they think that it would negatively impact them politically or draw the ire of President Trump. Talk about supporting bipartisan candidates right now. I know you had come out and supported James Walkinshaw. He was the former staffer to Jerry Connolly in Northern Virginia, a longtime congressman who passed away from his battle with cancer. That happened during the campaign. Are there any Republicans that you threw your hat into the race, an endorsement, if you will, prior to Election Day?
We didn't have many endorsements prior to the election. We're in current talks with, a few different offices. What we really want to see from the Republican side, when we go forward with endorsements is that they're agreeing with us on this issue and that we see clear policy gains out of that endorsement. So we don't just throw it around because we want to. It is very much a strategic endorsement. It is, we will be with you. We have hundreds of volunteers that can phone bank and canvas for you. We will make campaign contributions, but we have to be very clear about what we're getting in return because, as we've kind of discussed here, it's only a few Republicans who have really been voting the way that, we'd like to see over the past few months. So, when we go forward with any of those sorts of endorsements, it has to be that we're seeing a policy change.
Some of the largest headlines right now in the international column, if you will. You go on a news website, you've got your local news, you've got your business news, your finance news, and international news, your world news. Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas conflict, where a ceasefire has apparently ceased. It only seems as strong as Benjamin Netanyahu or Hamas militants want it to be. It doesn't seem like it's really held. What's your organization doing right now, or at least just your opinion on the status of ending these brutal conflicts?
We're very squarely focused on the foreign aid budget. I think, we can try to cover everything. And there's other organizations out there that, cover these sorts of issues. Foreign Policy for America is one. Our perspective is the way we're going to get bipartisan progress here, the way we're going to be very clear with members of Congress and the public about exactly what we believe in is focusing on a single issue, and that is funding for foreign aid. Again, the reason we focus on that is because there is nothing else that the U.S. does that has saved 90 million lives over the past 2 decades. This is simply something we should be doing. And, even if people are not agreeing on other things, let's come together on this.
So, just to be clear, you are lobbying on behalf of foreign aid getting into Gaza as well.
Yes, we're lobbying for, the federal budget for foreign aid staying where it needs to be.
Can people support humanitarian efforts here at home? They could arguably donate to a specific PAC, a lobbyist organization on behalf. But would you recommend people get involved if they are interested in this?
I think the most powerful thing to do politically is to be involved on the campaign and the donation side. Simple reality is American politics is very messed up, especially post Citizens United. The thing that really does carry weight in American politics is helping a member of Congress win re-election, especially if they're on a critical committee. So, when we look at these big issues, even like a little bit of money, like, $1,000 to the right member of Congress at the right time can have a very big impact on how these things go forward. And that's, why our focus is kind of saying to these members of Congress, listen, we know policy wise, you've been on the same page with us for the past 2 decades. Now let's talk through this politically. How can we help? How can we get along?
The polling shows some fatigue among the American electorate right now on United States involvement overseas. How do you change that?
So USAID still polls pretty positively among the American people, like over half. It is done all right. Specific programs even poll better. You look at global health programs specifically; those have over 75% approval ratings in most states in the United States. So I think the support among American people is there, but it definitely needs to be strengthened. One thing that, we're working on now are kind of our camp chapters and trying to change American opinion from the bottom up. So we have about 80 campus chapters across the country.
College campuses.
College campuses, yes. And so starting in January, I'll be going on kind of a road trip to visit each of those campus chapters, speak at them, speak at Rotary Clubs, World Affairs Councils, and try to show that students really do care about this issue because, they do, and re-enlive in kind of the American support around this issue. Show that together as young people, we can change something. We can actually make some progress.
Motivating some young folks in college campuses where a lot of these conversations begin. One big question I want to ask you and get your personal take on this. How can America best vouch for their own leadership, convince other countries that America can be trusted, considering leadership can change on a dime every single 4 years, policy can change on a dime? How do you think the United States can best convince countries that they can trust us to not only set up a project for humanitarian efforts, but follow it through, even if the guard is changed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they can trust us right now. I honestly don't. I mean, especially with, China rapidly increasing its foreign aid. It announced, $53 billion in new aid and investment for sub-Saharan Africa alone. We're not the partner of choice anymore. In fact, globally, we had polled better than China as far as the approval rating of the United States for decades until this year, when suddenly we are less popular than China. So, I don't think countries can trust us, and that is because we have failed them. We have cut off these programs without warning. We have let people starve and die of disease without any warning whatsoever. And so I think it's going to really take policymakers coming together and thinking through, do we care about our national security? Do we care about countering adversaries? Do we care about trust on the world stage? And if we do, we're going to have to rebuild that. We're going to have to get these programs back online, and it's going to take a lot more time and funding, and we're going to have to see a sea change here to make that happen.
And that's the litany of questions about your organization, but I don't want to get personal. Tell me why you're so passionate about this. What's your own story that got you here?
So I was looking at this website, PEPFAR Impact Counter, which was tracking the number of people that had died so far due to cutting off HIV/AIDS treatment and prevention programs. And I would see that going up every day. And this really just started on my college campus. I reached out to congressional staffers I knew. I used to work in the office of Jerry Connolly. And so reached out to people from there, as well as others, started asking friends to do the same. And it kind of just grew from there. I didn't have a very personal connection to this besides just caring and honestly not wanting to be indifferent to what was going on overseas, and slowly just found other people who kind of believe the same.
Natural empathy. That's what you're going with here.
That is what I'm going with.
Asher, I appreciate your time. Don't want to eat up too much of your busy schedule, but how might people best get in contact with you if they're interested in learning more?
Sure. So my email is ashermoss at a the number 4al.org. Similarly, you can go to our website, a4al.org. We offer legislative internships as well as, other positions on our team. So if you're interested in meeting with your member of Congress, if you're interested in taking on some sort of position on the policy, comms, fundraising side, whatever that might be, definitely reach out to me. Would love to get in touch and see how we can work together because I really do think that's the only way we're going to make progress here.
Asher Moss with the Alliance for American Leadership. Thank you for joining Byline.
Thank you, Ben. Take care.
All right, let's keep going beyond the headlines, making sense of them without spin. What happened recently? A lot, and a lot that could impact your daily life. Major election night on Tuesday for Democrats in New York, in New Jersey, in Virginia, and in California. Will the campaign strategy they deployed in 2025 continue into 2026? How might it change? Zohran Mamdani, the self-described Democratic socialist and now mayor-elect of New York City, hit hard on the economy and affordability. So did Mikey Sherrill, the governor-elect, the Democrat in New Jersey, as did Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat in Virginia, who's going to be the very first female governor of the Commonwealth in its 400-year history, a major history marker there. The Republican nominee was also a woman, Winsome Earl-Sears, the current lieutenant governor. She would have also made history. We knew that was going to happen. California just passed Proposition 50, which is that effort to redraw congressional districts early, typically happens at the end of a decade. Gavin Newsom, the Democrat governor, had said that he wanted to get this done, and it was a response to what was happening in Texas, where Republicans had advanced efforts to redraw their congressional districts early to likely favor their own party. Newsom said, well, touche, we're going to do the same thing. And this handily passed in California. I am curious to see how this sets up Newsom politically in the future. Is this going to embolden him or bolster his chances in possibly entering the presidential race? It's likely going to be a crowded field of Democrats, at least by many political analysts' take on who's going to jump in. I am really curious to see what other tactics Democrats may deploy on the campaign trail, and Republicans as well, who did not win these major contests on Tuesday. In Virginia, it was cultural issues that were in focus. In New Jersey, the Republican nominee there, Jack Ciattarelli, had sided himself with President Trump and his policies. But it appears by the exit polling that this election, at least the issues that mattered to voters the most, was the economy, and by some accounts, it was also the Trump factor, too. I'm also curious to see how voters in these states that just largely elected Democrats, New Jersey and Virginia, react to the policies that their brand new top officials propose as they come into office in the next couple of months, and how they will respond at the ballot box when it comes to congressional midterms. The policies that they set are ultimately going to be used in campaign ads in 2026, Republicans going after whatever may come about, but also Democrats touting their successes. They're going to have to hit the ground running in these states in order to impress the electorate. Democrats are really going to try and impress voters in order to advance their party nominees when it comes to the congressional midterms and November of next year. TikTok? Well, if you fly, you might not be able to get to where you're going. Why? United States Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said some American airspace might have to be closed because the shutdown is going on and because air traffic controllers aren't showing up to work. Why? They're not getting paid. They're trying to find other ways to make money, put food on the table, whether it's a rideshare, whether it's possibly picking up a shift at the grocery store. Who knows what it is? Well, they're struggling and their priority is safety. So if they don't have enough bodies in the towers to man an already stressful job, Duffy says, well, we're just going to have to close airspace because it's not worth risking anybody's safety. We're getting closer to the Thanksgiving holiday. People are going to want to go home. So are lawmakers. And if they can't, I'm curious to see if that is going to weigh on their minds in order to get this government shutdown resolved, which is now the longest in American history. It is in month number 2. The now second longest was during President Trump's first term, which had hit 35 days, I believe. It was definitely 30 plus days. SNAP benefits are in limbo. Millions of Americans don't know if they're going to be getting their SNAP food assistance on time. President Trump had said that that was going to be made whole after the funding ran out. At least temporarily he would fund it. But then he came out and did an about-face. There's a back and forth here. 1 in 8 Americans reportedly rely on SNAP benefits. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers are also furloughed right now, and they don't know if they're going to get back pay. It's a question that the White House is mulling. Should they get back pay? Who should get back pay? Who shouldn't get back pay? And if some jobs will even still be alive, in existence, when they come back following the government shutdown. However, President Trump signed a bill into law during his first term that said furloughed federal workers need to get their back pay once a government shutdown ends. All right, will people cut back on the amount they spend this holiday season? Thanksgiving's coming up. You know what that means? Black Friday, Cyber Monday. The National Retail Federation just came out with their holiday season expenditure outlook. They say consumers will spend the second highest amount on record, according to a National Retail Federation holiday survey. $890.49 per person, because every penny matters, right? That's on average this year, according to the consumers who want to spend money on gifts, food, decorations, and other seasonal items. Falls only 1.3% less than last year's record of $901.99, just shy of an even 902. Well, that appears that spending is staying on pace. If anything, cut back by, 1.3%. But still, I'm sure that consumers will be looking for a good deal, that they might cut back in some cases too, especially folks who are hardest hit, who might not be receiving SNAP benefits because that funding has not been made whole. Furloughed employees who are not getting a paycheck right now, those federal employees. If people might not fly, it's expensive. We know that the airspace in some places of the country might be shut down, as I had mentioned, because of the government shutdown and air traffic controllers calling out. I find this is interesting considering that National Retail Federation says that consumers are still planning to spend a good amount of money. Retailers know that this is a tough time right now. It was Amazon who just came out and said that they're going to have several different deal dates, if you will. We know that Prime Day is expanded to more than just one day, but they'll have their typical Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals, but they also have several days of deals leading up to that in November too. Walmart has historically also offered several days of deals. Target as well. Retailers know that there's a lot of penny pinching going on. I'd be curious to see if there are additional big retailers that come out, maybe even mom and pop shops that offer specialty discounts right now. Is the Supreme Court going to say the president did not have the legal authority to issue widespread, sweeping tariffs? They just heard oral arguments here in his line of questioning to President Trump's legal team. Conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed during President Trump's very first term, as many of us remember, he questioned whether that this was okay, if the president had the authority to issue these widespread tariffs. Who knows how the court's going to side on this, how it may impact the tariffs that are already in place. So we'll have to see what the Supreme Court ultimately decides there. China and the United States continues to go in a back and forth on tariffs. It's a tit for tat that appears to not have an end in sight. We will have to keep an eye on what happens domestically and internationally as well. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Asher. He's a relatively young guy. But as you had heard him say, he was largely interested in expanding international diplomacy, humanitarian efforts, because he saw the death count go up of people who were dying from HIV. I am curious to see how his group is deployed on Capitol Hill in the void that was USAID and the many staffers and career diplomats who had worked there on humanitarian efforts as well as diplomacy. How that may influence America's relationships with other countries, maybe instilling some trust that America can follow through on their international promises. He believes that other countries can't trust the United States right now. So we'll keep tabs with Asher for sure. That's going to do it for another episode of Byline with Ben Dennis, beyond the headlines, making sense of them without spin. We'll be here again next week. I'm going to take some time off to celebrate a wedding out in California with some very, very good friends of mine. And we'll be sure to keep close tab of everything that is happening across the country, especially when it comes to your wallet, politics, government, health, education, tech. I'll keep a tab on it. So I appreciate you tuning in again. Send me a DM on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. What questions do you have that possibly leaders need to be answering right now? What story do you want to dive in deeper on? What context and analysis do you want to know? Whose opinions matter to you? Let me know. I'm always interested in expanding my ideas, my running list of topics and interviews to dive in on with Byline. So with that, have a great week, a great weekend. Take it easy. Stay safe, everybody. And we'll see you soon.